It is now 7:35, and I will call this special work session of the Burnsville City Council to order. And this evening, we are going to be presented with two of our service functions here at the city. One is finance, and the other is parks and recreational facility. Who's going first? Finance?
Madam Mayor, I believe I am. That is the plan.
Okay. Mr.
Saving the fun part
Nantee.
for last, I guess.
CEO of, CFO of our finance department.
She just got promoted. Thank you, Madam Mayor, and for the promotion. See y'all later. I'm here on behalf of the finance department this evening to discuss the service inventory for our department. Much like you have done in previous presentations, we'll talk this evening really about who we are, how our service delivery has evolved over time. And we do, as I promised during the dinner before this, we do have some fun graphs to share with you. It wouldn't be a finance presentation without it. And then we'll close, as the other presentations have, with a discussion about alignment with future priorities. So as you can see, they've already taken me out as far as the organizational structure is concerned, but
Wow.
But you are going to take us through the budget.
that is correct, ma'am. There is
Yeah.
a plan for that as part of the transition, yes, that I will.
Yeah. You
be
can't
here to help.
abandon, and I think you and I can't abandon the process.
There you go. I'll be here to help through the end of the year, and to save the council or any staff any jokes, Greg already has extended a standing job offer, so I have that available if I ever so choose.
Thanks for that recognition, Dan. I appreciate that.
Is that like a seasonal budget thing then?
Maybe. Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I know Ryan needs help with seasonals, so I'm happy to fill in there too. So as you can see here, the organizational structure of the department, as the group is aware, Jenny Rohde will be rejoining the city as the regular CFO, and I will be concluding my duties as interim, but then, as Madam Mayor mentioned, will be available through the end of the year to assist with the budget process and, as needed, really continuing the partnership that exists between the city and Ehlers and Associates. The thing that I would like to draw your attention to in this slide itself is this is actually a new structure for the department. Previously, the department had an assistant finance director and an accounting manager, and when our assistant finance director left for a different opportunity, we took the opportunity to take a critical look at our operation and to reorganize in a way that was more efficient, and also recognized some of the strengths and taking advantage of some growth and development opportunities for long-term employees within the department. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few slides. And then additionally, this helped us support our utility billing function by adding a new revenue accounting specialist. We actually were doing final interviews for that job today. So there will be someone else helping out there, also with our Ems Billing, which is a big portion of what the finance department does day in and day out. The thing I'm also proud to say is, in true finance department fashion, the reorganization was actually done at a cost savings to the city. So we were able to provide, I think, better service and align better internally the time and talents of our staff, and then do so something that did not increase cost for the organization, and to help defray the cost of the accountant position that was included in the organizational analysis. So the finance department generally provides stewardship for the city's finances and the financial position of the city. And as I would stress in the latter half of the statement, really for today and tomorrow, I was actually in a meeting earlier today, and I was joking with the staff that really you can look like the finance department can look like downright geniuses in any given year solving for a budget problem or a particular issue, but really the test of the department is, can you do it over a long period of time? Can you solve for these issues day in and day out? And so we take very seriously the last portion of the statement for today and tomorrow, which is, as you know, when we present the finance plans, we take a longer view of things to see really what are the impacts of certain decisions on the financial position of the city over time. And as you can see here, this is a smattering of the various things that the department is up to. I often like to joke that with the accounting and audit, that is the concrete and sequential side of the brain, and then with the budget and planning, that is the abstract and creative portion of the brain. So folks in the finance department have to bring both of those sensibilities to bear depending on what it is that they're up to in any given day. really under the accounting and audit functions, you know, the classic joke that I like for finance people is we're always just making sure our debits match our credits. So we're looking at what is happening in the organization, is there enough money coming in, and is there an appropriate amount of money going out? And there are any number of tasks and individual things that we have to do day in and day out. Something that comes up a lot for staff are really questions about internal controls. I've actually was fielding a question earlier today about an idea that a staff member had and wondering if it was appropriate for the city to spend money on something like that. And so we advise on, for staff, like what meets a public purpose policy expenditure. So like our friends in IT and HR, finance isn't everything, and it takes us all over the organization. And something that I personally like about it, and I know the finance staff likes about it, is there's always something new and different to talk about. And as you've heard me joke before, the budget, to move into the second column, is like a Rubik's Cube, you know, that fights back. And so it's a very interesting and dynamic place. A lot of what we do in budget and planning, as you know, is city council and city manager support, doing a lot of analysis, working with departments to identify their needs. And then what we've been talking about a lot lately is, and we'll talk more in the presentation, is focusing on debt and debt issuance and making sure that the city has a sustainable plan moving forward to finance. It's really big projects that cannot be accomplished with the ordinary revenues of the organization. And then lastly, with our friends in the city clerk's office, we do a lot of records and reporting. And so I get any number of forwarded messages from MAC, from the Office of the State Auditor, or the Minnesota Department of Management and Budget, on any number of things that the state or other agencies are interested in the city reporting on. And something we do quite a bit of is the policy analysis, program evaluation, and special projects. I joke sometimes that the finance department, because it takes you a lot of different places, much like our friends in HR, can tend to be a little bit of a dumping ground for those special projects and special initiatives. So oftentimes, if there are questions that show up, where we try to be the Johnnies and Janes on the spot to help out and answer some of those thoughts and questions. So a few graphs to kind of go over what it is the department does on a day in and day out basis. Here you see a list of our accounts payable transactions. Really over the last so many years, the number of transactions that increased by about 50%, as you can see, primarily in purchasing cards. So the department has issued more and more purchasing cards. That's the benefit of the organization. We actually get a rebate on the purchasing cards, so we do try to push activity that way. We get a small amount of money back. I use small as a relative term, you know, vis-a-vis the entire budget of the organization. But generally, and you'll probably see a theme here developing, those amounts have increased over time, while we really haven't seen kind of checks fall off, meaning that we've been doing more transactions over the last 5 years. Same thing with invoices being processed. This is actually accounts receivable, or monies that the city's received. So the invoices have increased, and then the amount that has been invoiced has also been increased over the same time. And as I noted in the slide, the payments have actually doubled since 2017. And then additionally, the city's investment portfolio has increased by just about a third over that same period of time, which requires much more management on the part of the organization. And because of the additional demands placed on the portfolio, and also the low but now increasing interest rate environment, and I believe the council received an update in your recent council weekly, and there'll be an item at a forthcoming council meeting to actually further engage Ehlers and Associates to help with investment management services.
Yeah.
And that's actually going to bear fruit in the budget process. When we talk next week about the budget, we'll talk about some additional investment earnings that we'll be recognizing in the budget, which will of course then help defray and reduce property tax levy pressures. But again, as you can see, the city has a significant investment portfolio. These are monies that are basically pooled across all the various funds, and then we invest them on the city's behalf based on the city's needs. So generally the portfolio is laddered over time to recognize when the city has certain maturities or capital outlays, or even just ordinary payroll. We try to invest monies to get as much yield and return as possible. But again, it has increased since 2017. Public utility accounts, this is perhaps my favorite slide in the whole presentation. So annually, we have 2 people in utility billing, Shane and Vicky, and they bill, on average, right around 200,000 accounts. So there are about 17,000 accounts monthly. We bill monthly here at the city of Burnsville, and so those 2 folks are basically responsible for 100,000 billings each. It's an extraordinary operation, and when we talk about some data here in a second, you'll see really how busy they are. But really over the last 5 years, as you can see from this just small sample of data and activities, the department is under increasing pressure to process more transactions, invoice more people, manage more money, assist more public utility accounts, and that's not in addition to all of the other things that happen in the course of a day, such as the meetings, working on the budget, handling the audit, etc. So I did a little thinking on what was a good approximation and maybe a helpful way to understand what the finance department does day in and day out. I took some easily collectible data. This is, again, like my previous statement, doesn't reflect everything the department does day in and day out, or as this slide, month in and month out. But if we were to take the various general operations items, those claims, purchasing cards, invoices, the department also processes insurance claims. We do a handful of those every month. These are things like, well, I don't want to pick on any one department. We'll say a car backing into a pole, and their insurance claim has to be made, something like that.
That was very cautious.
Yes.
I appreciate that.
So those things happen. Journal entries in our accounting system, revenue collection batches, things we do in EMS administration, and then as you see down there, the public utility administration. On average, there are about 20,000 different activities each month, or things that the finance department touches. And of course, not all of these 20,000 things take as much time or as more time as others, but it's a good understanding of how many times the department has to touch something in a given month. The two folks in public utilities, the eye-catching number for me when we did this is between emails, water start messages, and phone calls in a given year, they're responding to around, depending on the year, 7,000 to 9,000 inquiries. Or as you can see here on the slides, those two folks are responding to 600 emails a month, almost 40 water smart messages, and around 322 phone calls. So they are absolutely in the customer service business, helping the residents and businesses of the city respond to their questions and concerns and comments about their utility bills. If you look over at the green, I've done some quick math for the council. If you take those approximate 20,000 activities and you divide them out by the number of FTEs, right now the department is operating at about 7.5 FTEs. There's not a full-time director. I'm only here for 20 to 30 hours a week, depending on the week. And as Greg alluded to in a previous presentation, there was a reallocated FTE from the finance department to the communications and community engagement department. So you see right now, each employee or FTE rather, is doing 133 of those things in a month. If we had the FTE back, it would be 117, or about 6% more. If we were at the full complement, it would be basically even. And then the additional FTE that's being requested as a part of the budget process, it would be about a 10% reduction. But the thing that I would focus on in this particular table is the 7.5. Right now, without having that FTE, being down a director, everyone in the department is essentially doing 20% more. And they've been doing it really now for the better part of a year. And I would add, just so the council is aware, fairly uncomplainingly. I can't say there aren't moments of stress. You know, everybody vents, people are human, but I hear about it very little. And that's to their credit, and it's to their commitment that they have for this organization, both to the broader community and their peers in the city. And for the time that I've been here, I couldn't be prouder of them, and I just think you need to know that.
Thank you. This is very important information. I mean, didn't know any of that. We're only at 7.5 FTEs for people doing that much work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but you know, there is light at the end of the tunnel, so to speak. So as we talked earlier, there'll be a new regular CFO, so there'll be someone that will have a full-time to dedicate to the department, and I'm going to go ahead and say, and then some. And then we are in the process of hiring for that revenue accounting specialist through the reorganization that I talked about earlier. And then assuming the council were to move forward with the organizational analysis implementation as previously described, then we would have that additional FTE sometime next year, depending on when it was actually hired and that person was able to start, et cetera. So, but I think ultimately, when you look at this data, it really does validate the findings from CLA and the organizational analysis about some of the stressors that exist in the department as they just try to accomplish the regular business of the financial activities of the organization.
You know, Mayor Council, we struggle across the organization to be able to as clearly quantify or objectively quantify the work that some of our staff are doing, particularly on the administration side of things. and I think it's just a good opportunity. I very much agree and would echo everything that Dan has said. I often slightly kid with the department that in a way I did some of this to them, right? We've restructured, we've had some transition. We're on a road to correcting some of that, but it really does highlight first and foremost the commitment to service that those 7 people in our finance department, 7.5 people in our finance department, come to work day in and day out and provide to this community. It oftentimes is not seen or felt, maybe with the exception of our utility billing folks, at least directly by the community. But this, when Dan first showed me kind of how he quantified this, I think I joked that, well, yeah, leave it to the finance guy to actually figure this out. But most importantly, it paints a very clear picture of the reality that those folks have experienced in their work day in and day out. And not only do they not come and complain about it or come begrudgingly, they come day in and day out with a common commitment, not only to this organization but to this community. I'd be remiss not to recognize and certainly echo what Dan is saying. And I also think it's reflective of Jenny deciding to rejoin the organization, that there's real strength in what we have going on, but we really do have some significant needs here, and it's important to recognize that.
Yeah, because the only other 2 departments, because I look at their reports on a monthly basis, is police and fire on the activities that they execute every month. And then, of course, we understand how many sworn officers we have. But what we didn't get from the administrative side of all of that is the number of activities that they execute. This one, you're talking about all of that right now, and then how many FTEs. Because I'm always looking at what police and fire are doing on a monthly basis on the activities that they're engaged in on a criminal side. But the operational side, I'm sure that with what you have, there's a lot of activity that goes on with a number of people. Yes, Dan?
Quick question, Dan. On this chart here, how many are we actually budgeted for at this time?
Madam Member, as the council, at this point in time, it would be the 9.
9, okay.
And then there's a request for an additional
For
1.
1, okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Mayor, I would add that there may be people from time to time that accuse the finance department of acting a little like a police department, so that does happen a little bit here and there.
I think it's also worth noting that
Tanya's like, you say it like that's a bad thing.
I think it's important to note that just by way of operations, police and fire are pretty capable and resourced to provide, and just by nature of the operation, to provide information on calls to service and types of calls, and it's pretty quantifiable. That gets more difficult, to Dan's opening comment on this slide, in our administrative departments, and actually Garrett and Dan, Bethany, and some others and I met to prepare these conversations for you tonight. Garrett saw this slide and said, "Oh, come on, Dan." Because in all seriousness, it isn't as easy in some of our operations to quantify the activities and the really great work that our staff are doing. To Dan's point, this only captures some of what the finance department is doing or touching every month or every day. So an important recognition.
Yeah, it is.
I would also add that it's these folks who are making it possible on the EMS side, which is the heaviest of the load volume in the fire department, to bill for and to run our EMS operation.
Yeah.
Right? That literally is one person who's doing that for us and supporting that operation. That's not something that I take lightly, and I think is noteworthy in our operation. It's incredibly efficient, and as you've seen in the organizational analysis, realize that efficiency comes at a bit of a price. That redundancy and backup and support for that particular operation is also very important for our fire service, for our EMS service.
Yeah.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I would add to the city manager's remarks that part of the reorganization that was talked about earlier was to add that revenue accounting specialist to help with utility billing and EMS administration. So really stressing that revenue component with the billings on both of those, and to try to build a little more bench strength in those two areas, understanding how enormously important they both are and the tremendous amount of work volume that flows through both of those activities.
I think it captures the efficiency of how Dan and the team has approached the restructures of their department as well, right? Because it could have been pretty easy, frankly, for the department to come and say, hey, we need 2 people, right? None of this cross-functional stuff, we want 2. And they didn't. They rolled up their sleeves, they thought critically about how they were gonna best deliver service, and that redundancy and cross-training is efficient, even amidst the request to add an FTE. So, our service delivery, as we mentioned, has evolved over time. A few things to touch on here, and this is by no means a complete survey of all the things that have changed, but I think as the council is aware, reports and grant management has become an increasingly challenging issue for the finance department. We know from any number of grants or grant activities that there's always reporting and additional things that come along, and in fact, the organizational analysis as part of the third FTE that was added for the finance department to be contemplated in the future year was a grants coordinator. So we've heard generally from the departments that they would like assistance with applying for, managing, reporting on, closing out grants. I think there is always a tremendous amount of success in the city for winning grants, and then there is then the business after the fact of actually managing and taking care of them and keeping yourself in good standing with the agencies that provide those grants so you can get them in the future. And so it's just, to the city manager's point earlier, it's just one of those kind of unseen things that happens, and we're hearing from departments more and more that they'd like more support and assistance in those endeavors.
Question, Madam Mayor.
Yeah.
We had a
Kate.
grant writer at one point. Any
Yeah.
idea
Julie.
why
Doshek.
we didn't, when she moved on, why we didn't backfill that role? Because it basically paid
just
for
didn't-
itself
we
because
didn't
of the money
backfill
that
the
that
role.
person found.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, the position was eliminated as part of budget saving measures following the economic downturn,
Oh,
2008, 2009.
Okay.
And then the other thing is the reporting function. So we just know there are new OSA reports, there are new laws for the truth in taxation requirements, there's ARPA reporting now, there are opioid settlement reports that the city will have to file, there's CDBG reports, and then of course, as I mentioned, if the city were to win a COPS and SAFER grants, there would be reporting requirements associated with those. And that's just a small sample of the number of reports I can show you.
And then if we get all of Ryan's grants,
Yep.
you know, get the
And-
RISE grant, you know.
And the federal reporting requirements are more strenuous than the state or county reporting requirements, so it's worth noting as well. And there are additional audit requirements that are associated with those grants if they're of a certain size in a given year. And that's just really just a smattering of some of the reports. When I became the interim finance director at the time, Jenny left me with a document that detailed out all of the different reports and when it is they had to be submitted and who was gonna do them and how they were gonna get done. And one of the first things that we had to do was sit down and figure out, okay, we're down these couple staff, 1.5 FTE, who's gonna write all these reports and make sure we get things on time? Because I don't want Mac to get a nasty gram from the state that then gets forwarded to me saying, where's this report? Budget policy, there's been a lot of interest from the council about changes in budget policy, from participatory budgeting, priority-based budgeting, 2-year budgeting. There's even been interest at the staff level about looking at other budget softwares to help make our budget process smoother, provide more information, make it more robust. And because of the lack of resources, we just haven't been able to explore those things in any real meaningful fashion. And it's also worth noting that when the budget process changed, that created a lot of consternation in the finance department because the budget process ended up overlapping with the audit process. And we're really only geared to do one at a time because they're both really labor-intensive activities. So there was a few weeks there where the finance department was under a tremendous amount of stress to kick off the budget process and wrap up the audit all at the same time. Customer delivery, we have been eager partners with all of the departments on many of their new software packages. So OpenGov has a significant financial component to it. WaterSmart was rolled out with utility billing. We, this last year, participated in meetings with our colleagues in Parks and Rec about new recreation software. All of these things have ties into the financial system, and they take a lot of time, energy, and effort to figure out, as Tom can no doubt attest. And we're on the eve right now of, as the council knows from the CIP presentation, of doing an ERP implementation, which would be 18-month to 2-year process to basically give the city a brand new financial system, potentially a new utility billing system, and potentially a new HRIS system. And so these are all things that will put a lot of pressure on the department, but hopefully allow us to evolve and change and learn and grow as we get those new systems and new technologies. But I think, as everyone knows, getting over that hump can be a tremendous task. And then, as I mentioned, I won't belabor the point, but then just the fewer resources of the FTEs and not having a full-time director. So we took a little time to look at some of our peers. This comes, these are 5 from the list of peer cities that Burnsville normally uses. As you can see, Apple Valley has about 5 FTEs in their finance department. They have a slightly different model. They have a handful of FTEs that are actually housed in other departments, so they're a little more decentralized than Burnsville is. So they have an accounting clerk, for example, in their municipal liquor operation, or they have a utilities accountant in their utility department. So they just have a little bit different structure, but really they have about 9 to 10, depending on how you count them. In Brooklyn Park, they have 9. They have also a different structure. Their kind of front desk and customer service function is in their finance department, and so they actually get direct support for their finance activities from their front desk. So their front desk does things like cashiering, accepting large volumes of payments, helping with customer service phone calls, things like that. So it says 9, but really they have 9, and however many more they get help from in customer service. Coon Rapids at 10, Edina at 9.5. As the council knows, Edina is a great comparison because they have a similar EMS structure to we do. And then Woodbury, again, at 11.5. So really, when we talk about the number of FTEs, we can see generally among our peers, really all of them have more FTEs in their finance departments than Burnsville currently has. Perhaps with the exception of Apple Valley, which has 9, but as you know from the previous slide, we're still operating under 9. But the balance of them have more, and the ones that have EMS have more for sure. So, moving into strategic priorities, one thing I like to say, and I've mentioned to the leadership team a few times, my personal philosophy when it comes to finance, I think it's something that the department has embraced, is we really consider ourselves an internal service partner. I talked at the roundtable meeting about finance not being just a tool, but someone that can help figure out the best way to accomplish a certain project or task. And really, we try to help departments get to yes. And so I stress that a lot with our staff members, that we come to things with an open mind. Sometimes there are very good reasons we can't get to yes. Something is too expensive, there isn't statutory authority for it, but we really try to move beyond, as I joked before, just worrying about if our debits match our credits. We're really trying to help the departments in a meaningful way. And we do that across all the strategic priorities. So really with safety, first and foremost, we've interpreted this one from the finance department. We safeguard the financial resources of the city. We try to make sure that the council doesn't have to deal with big unanticipated budget holes, or you don't wake up one day and there's a bunch of money missing at City Hall. These things are tremendously important to us. It's taken very seriously, and we know that we have to have the resources available to make sure that everyone in the city can accomplish their respective missions. We partner with our other departments on critical infrastructure that are really safety sensitive and mission critical, most notably with critical equipment, and working with fleet and our public safety departments to making sure that they have the money and resources that they need to replace the equipment they use day in and day out. And then, as the city manager mentioned, we have a really big role in supporting EMS through the EMS administration and the revenue billing component there. So real big priority for us. In community engagement, we really strive to be as responsive as possible, and as I talked about with like utility billing, for example, they're returning hundreds of phone calls and emails and messages in a given month, and I think the rest of the department meets that standard as well, really trying to get back to people in a very thoughtful fashion. I would just share a story with you that extends a little bit beyond Burnsville to Lakeville. We actually had a situation where we had a Lakeville resident contact the city of Burnsville and say, I'm paying Burnsville franchise fees, and I shouldn't be. And we did a little research and figured out that they are essentially have a parcel in the extreme northwest corner of Lakeville, and they technically have a Burnsville address. And so,
Oops.
rather than basically saying, well, call the utility companies, that's not our business, they're the ones that administer it. We actually, at the department, took the time, took the gentleman's information and went above and beyond and called the respective utility companies and then asked them to follow up with us to make sure that he was actually taken off the billing for those franchise fees. And so I think that is emblematic of the service that Burnsville tries to provide both to the Burnsville community and also just to, I think, enhance the reputation of public officials generally, that not just hang up the phone and say, well, that's not our problem, you gotta call the utility companies, because
Good job.
nobody likes getting shuffled around like that, especially when they tell us, well, we were told to call you. Then you say,
Yeah.
you gotta call them.
Yeah. Nicely done.
So I think those
Wow.
are the sensibilities that we try to bring to community engagement and really figuring out what are ways that we can help and utilize the resources that we have here to make folks that interact with the city of Burnsville, be they residents, be they visitors, business owners, or even folks that never thought they'd have contact with the city of Burnsville. We are here to help them and do it with a smile. And then we're committed to transparency. As you know, we have the budget transparency portal. And as I talked earlier, we are interested in alternative budget methodologies and what that means for enhancing the visibility and transparency of city financials. And then beyond that, we support initiatives that are related to community engagement like OpenGov, like WaterSmart, making sure that people have at their disposal tools that they can use to get the information they need when they want it. So we've been really trying to partner with the other parts of the organization to make those systems a reality. Organizational culture, we provide training for city staff. We recently worked with our friends in the city attorney's office to provide a purchasing training to all departments through Burnsville University, so people are aware of the different rules and regulations whenever they are expending public funds. And as I mentioned earlier, we're really focused on trying to grow the staff in the department. We have many committed, bright, long-term staff in the finance department, and 3 of them were recently promoted to principal financial analyst and then to deputy CFO in recognition of really their own talents and abilities as individuals, but as Greg mentioned, how well they embody the values and mission of the organization. And so really trying to weave those strategic priorities through all things, even the culture that is in the department and the things that we're trying to recognize for others to see that are important and can actually result in material benefits for people if they act accordingly. And then, lastly, we really in this area just tried, as I mentioned, demonstrate the department as an internal service partner. So recently we went through a process improvement project with community development to try to improve the receiving of payments as it relates to permits and things that they deal with over there. Community vibrancy, again, partnering with community development to provide resources for programs. So we worked with them recently before Jane Faulkner retired. I was working personally with her on putting together a lot of their new grant programs, working with the Center for Energy, and then also figuring out which ones we could administer in-house because the fees that were being charged were a little too high and we thought we could do it internally for cheaper, and that was true. And so we worked with them to get some of that spun up. And then really where we spend a lot of time on community vibrancy is we provide a lot of the day-to-day administration of things like the TIF districts and tax abatements that are offered by the city. So we do all the TIF reporting, all the tax abatement reporting. We do the financial analysis associated with them. Ryan and I just recently worked on a couple interfund loans, so we work on all of those things. So the departments that are delivering services to the community really do have the resources they need, and especially some of those more complex redevelopment financing tools. And the one thing I would say here, and definitely community vibrancy, is we try to, and I think the department is very good about this, really being open to new ideas and novel concepts. I can tell you right now, I've worked with many a finance department where all they are doing is they're interested in making sure that the funds are accounted for regularly, and anything that steps beyond that is they are not interested in, or sometimes they're downright hostile, and that is not the department you have here. They are open to doing things differently, they are open to working with people, and as I mentioned earlier, sometimes even to their consternation because it may create additional work for them, but I think it really speaks to how it is that they're trying to live the values that the council expects them to live day in and day out. In infrastructure, primarily partnering with Public Works to put together the CIP that the council reviews annually and supports really most of the expenditures of the organization. And then we also support the asset management process, so we assist with the acquisition, kind of maintenance and disposition of assets. You know, we're not necessarily picking up a wrench. We're not wrench turners, as our friends in the fleet study would say. But we do work with all of those departments to make sure that they have the appropriate insurance, that monies are available, that we're tracking their surplus equipment and booking those things accordingly. And so we do help them really day in and day out with tracking those items. And then a little bit different than the CIP, we also do the long-term financial models, and again, to stress to meet what's happening now and into the future. And then with sustainability, as I mentioned, we do all of the insurance management for property and casualty insurance. Our friends in HR do all of the stuff that's people related, like health and the workers' comp and whatnot. And then we really, as we've talked about in the CIP presentations, try to recommend and advocate for the prudent use of debt. That there are ways that the organization can be more sustainable over a long term with regard to its tax rate, its debt burden, and the projects that it needs to accomplish that really take an extraordinary amount of revenue. So we're very thoughtful and considerate about how to bring those things to bear. And then additionally in this area we participate in a number of working groups. Most recently the department, like all the other departments, served on the core team for the space study and would serve on similar teams in the future thinking about sustainability. A few challenges, I touched on a few of these, so I won't go into great detail. We do have a little trouble right now managing the regular work volume with those fewer FTEs. And as the city manager mentioned, we do have, because of that, kind of a lack of cross-training and a lack of redundancy. So that's definitely a strategic vulnerability that the organization has in that regard. We are kind of dealing, I think, with all the other departments and the council included, with the changing budget process and those evolving reporting requirements. And something we're seeing a lot from is really a growing demand for support from the finance department. So we get a lot of questions from departments about asking if we can help. Really oftentimes, if it involves money, they would like us to be involved, and we're happy to provide those services, but with the current complement of FTEs, it just doesn't become possible. A good example is we were interested in exploring a central cashiering model, but we just don't have the staffing to kind of take all of that away from the department so they wouldn't have to do it on a daily basis. We tried to work with them to change some of the process and do a little education and make them more comfortable. But as I mentioned earlier, when we look at some of our peer cities, we do see like something like central cashiering happening a lot. Aspirations. I stole this one from communications because who doesn't want to be more strategic and proactive? That sounds great to me. But it is really, really true. We're going to be transitioning to that enterprise resource planning system. It's a $1.5 million undertaking, and we want to make sure that given the level of investment that the community will make in those systems, that we can be as strategic and proactive as possible to take advantage of a new, interesting system and all the various modules that it will offer. That's still a year or so away, but it's something that we can start thinking about now, and assuming that there is additional staff, we would have more bandwidth to accomplish some of that. Something that we've talked about quite a bit, Greg and I, is developing the financial literacy within the organization. So really helping the organization understand how do the tenets of public finance work? How do property taxes work? What factors does the council and city manager weigh when they're recommending a budget? Really bringing a lot of more detail to bear so that when a decision is made financially, the organization just has a better sense of what are the moving pieces, rather than perhaps having a reactionary response that like, well, I didn't get my thing, and I'm gonna be upset about that. If we can teach them about how this kind of rich tapestry that is the budget and all these decisions get woven together, I think that would go a long way for making the organization more kind of sensitive and knowledgeable about finances, but then just having a greater understanding of all the moving pieces that go into that Rubik's Cube. And then we still want to review department operations internally. We've taken a first step at trying to be more strategic and reorganize some things, but there's more to be done here to really align certain tasks to people's competencies, and I would even go a step further to say take advantage of some of their extra competencies. We just haven't had the opportunity to do that the department's been in a crouch for a little while now, and we just don't have the time to kind of take that step back and think about who's doing what, when, and how. And I think there is really room there to be more efficient and kind of build on the reorganization that we've already talked about. And then lastly, we talk internally as a department all the time about how to further align with strategic priorities. One thing in particular, to speak to Ryan and sustainability, is we've talked internally about having a paperless AP system, but that would require a new software package. It would require training for all of the city because it would change how people spend money, but it would save the city from printing and processing payments in the thousands, maybe tens of thousands of pages. And so there are things out there that we can do meaningfully to advance the strategic priorities of the council, but right now there's, not to use the same word over and over again, but there's just not the bandwidth to do them at this point in time. So right now, as you know, we have 9. If we got what we were looking for in the organizational analysis, it would go to 12. We still are down 4 FTEs from 2006, and as I mentioned, staff capacity does make cross-training difficult. It also makes it difficult to accomplish new and different strategic initiatives. And then right now, as I mentioned, there is particular strain, I would say, in utility billing and also some of those EMS administration tasks, just for the sheer volume of work. And ultimately, based on what we've seen and the information presented, if over the next few years, if the department were able to grow to 12 FTEs, I think we could accomplish many of the things that were described in the aspirations and navigate many of the challenges. So this is maybe my favorite finance quote ever. And I'll just read it. Budgeting isn't about limiting yourself, it's about making the things that excite you possible.
I like that.
Everybody has a great idea. The next question they ask is, how are you going to pay for it?
Yeah.
And we're always happy to help you figure out how to pay for it.
Yeah.
So, with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions the council may have.
Very nicely done. I think that's
Madam Mayor,
Dan K.
this is maybe a Tom question, but because finance is about a lot of data, it's a lot of technology, as we look to grow the human resource in that department, are we also looking for software technology or systems that can replace some of the manual labor requirements? You know, when you think about, you hit on one of them, right? A software that could eliminate tens of thousands of documents and the handling of those documents, and possibly the labor required to handle all those documents, where electronic systems can replace them. Is there any research going into looking for software solutions to lessen our need for adding more human workforce? Sorry.
Members of the council, yes and no. So I was smiling because Tom and I earlier today were actually talking about like AI functionality as it relates to like finance items,
Yeah.
and ways that that technology could be brought to bear to perhaps automate or reduce the amount of, we'll just say, human error that could be included in some of those things. So I would say right now that there are some conversations that are happening about that, some of them as specific as paperless AP, and some of the things that could happen there. Some of them as nebulous as Tom and I talking about AI in the threshold of my office. And then there are some that are just on the horizon, which would be the ERP system implementation. Likely, as I mentioned, would cost probably around $1.5 million, but it would have many modules in it that would really move the city forward by leaps and bounds in terms of some of the capabilities of its financial systems. And so one in particular that we have talked about internally, if we were able to link up with the HRIS system, would be position budgeting. So what we could do is actually upload all of the staff into one position budgeting module and just slide that right into the budget. Now I pick on that one because it doesn't sound like that big of a deal, but really right now we have a leviathan of a spreadsheet that has all the staff on it, all of their wages, all of their step increases, all of the various multiples that exist, their health insurance. Every time there's a change, we have to change that spreadsheet, then we have to upload it into the system, then we have to proof it, and then if there's ever a little tweak, we have to go back through that whole process again.
Wow.
So one little change can precipitate sometimes a couple hours of work. And as you imagine, during the budget process, there are any number of changes that happen. And so that's just one small way where with like a new ERP system, we may be able to eliminate several hours, tens maybe more hours of work, just in that one budget process.
It's a great idea and a great example of a technology solution that may have a one-time upfront cost, but doesn't have the same ongoing costs of labor and benefits and everything else, and can actually save time for the folks that are using it today, or when it's implemented. It lessens the workload for the people that are on staff at the time. So great example of exactly what I was thinking, but I had no idea what it might be. I just knew that probably more opportunity for software tools for efficiency in a finance department versus departments that just, human resource is required, and there just isn't, you can't replace it with a software program. Police and fire, some in the streets, etc. Finance and administration is really where more of those opportunities lie, and finance to me is probably one of the top areas where software can really advance efficiency and reduce pressures on needing so many people to shuffle people around. So I appreciate that. I think we need to always be looking to invest in that because it's a wise decision at the time, and it pays dividends for decades.
Councilmember Keeley, to follow up on your question, I would say that in my 3 years in this organization coming in, one of the first observations that I made was the incredible amount of efficiency we've leveraged by the use of technology. Tom can speak far more eloquently than I about that as a priority, but I really do see that as being a hallmark of not only how we talk about being innovative, but how we really do deliver excellent service. I would also caution the council against making any sort of assumption that the organizational analysis hasn't in fact taken into account what Dan has described, in that in your examples you mentioned fire. I'll pick up BJ because he's not here. One of the things BJ has come to me to talk about fairly extensively in the organizational analysis process is EMS billing, and his view on the need for more people and more responsiveness from the finance department in order to effectively run that operation into the future. Said another way, there are some things that frankly we know that we can't be more efficient with simply leveraging additional technology without that human touch. It does vastly, HR director isn't here tonight, and I think that she would echo this, it does vastly change the types of jobs that we're hiring for. But I think it's that balance in delivering service out of these types of operations that's going to be most important as we continue to leverage the effectiveness and the efficiency of technology, but also make sure that we're delivering the type of and the level of internal service that our community-facing operations are demanding of these folks.
Yeah, Mayor, members of the council, I would also add, to echo the presentation, one of the challenges that the finance department has at this very moment is actually not having enough staff to implement technology solutions.
Yeah.
So we have struggled to kind of help with OpenGov. WaterSmart had some of its challenges. It was difficult to lend staff to go to like the recreation software meetings just because of the regular volume of work. And even some of those systems, I think as Tom can attest, we have not taken advantage of their full capabilities because we do not have the staff to bring them online, put in the data, to manage them, to really think about the integrations sometimes that have to happen because not all these systems are totally conversant with one another. And right now, given the current complement of FTEs, I think we would like to reach for that aspiration, to say that maybe there is an opportunity here to become more efficient through technology, but we just don't have the time to dedicate to it.
Yeah.
I think we had an interesting meeting this week. Dan, Tom, Carissa, so IT, finance, HR, and I met to talk about the enterprise resource management system that Dan has mentioned, the $1.5 million project. The impetus of the meeting was we know that we have some serious gaps in our HR technology, and I have some operational concerns about the resources that we're using and the potential risks that creates. Tom in the meeting was very quick to point out that, hey Greg, don't get too excited about bright shiny technology. Yes, that's part of the solution, but we also have to talk about capacity and put an organizational lens on what you might want to do. Said another way, Tom was reminding me that although technology is an important part of the efficiency that we're talking about, he didn't want me to get too far over my skis and suggesting that I had solutions before we had the resources to implement.
Yeah, because you can have the software, but now you have to input all of the information that it needs.
Well, even beyond that, it's the maintenance, it's the staff training, and it's the thoughtfulness around how are we really using technology well to most effectively deliver service to the organization and community. And we can continue to get better in that space.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, did you have another comment?
Just one analogy. We all have a lot of apps on our phone.
Yeah.
How many of us know how to use all
How
of
to
them?
use all of
Yeah,
them. Absolutely.
exactly,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Tom does.
Tom,
My kids do.
Although he is an Android user, so take that for what it is.
Hey,
Yeah.
Cause he's
sorry.
awesome.
hey, watch it.
I stepped right into
This
that.
was a project.
Yeah.
Cause you can open source on Android.
yeah.
True. There's a reason.
Okay, Dan, thank you so much. This was very comprehensive and insightful. I mean, it gave us insight into finance. It allows us to really understand all of the intricacies of the activities that that department delivers, not only internally, but externally, like we took care of the Lakeville residents. So, thank you so much.
Did they get a full refund of all the franchise fees they paid over the years?
That's what we told the utility companies they should be doing.
Yeah.
You don't have a last slide?
No,
He did have a thank you last slide.
Yeah,
I
he
saw
did have
that.
the
He
thank
normally
you
has a
slide.
last slide
Is
over
it?
there.
Yeah,
Oh, with a,
yeah,
Okay,
not this time.
You're already kind of
Bethany
moving
cut it
of
out for him.
yeah.
Yeah. I've officially started phoning
No
it in. I
means.
don't-
Yeah.
It was just a picture of the Ames Center.
okay. Thank you. Garrett, you're on deck.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, thank you for your time this evening. I know a lot of work goes into this for staff to prepare these presentations, and that said, it's still one of my favorite times to have the opportunity to share the great works and the things that the people of our Parks, Rec, and Facilities team are doing in this community. So I think Greg mentioned that yesterday there were 4 of us in a meeting. I had a chance to see Dan's presentation and all his charts, and after the meeting, I quickly scrambled to see if I could get a chart for the types of portable toilet uses and things like that. And unfortunately, I was unable to come up with that, so you're not gonna see that tonight.
Just didn't quite pan out for him.
Yeah, joking aside, he's proud of charts and stats, and I'm proud of the fact that we don't have that, because what we do is really about experiences, right? And so, we're gonna be talking about that a lot this evening. Our agenda is very similar to what you've heard up to this point, so I will not delay. Statistically and position-wise, who we are, our leadership team is in Parks Rec, and then our facility daytime and evening maintenance, and then our enterprise ice center and golf course. We have 4 programmers and coordinators who do a lot of the programming that you'll see in our rec times and that are going on out in the parks in the community. And then obviously you'll hear about the number of buildings and whatnot that we have. A lot of our stuff is about maintaining these facilities, cleaning up after events happen, getting things set up properly and things like that. We have 1 administrative assistant, and then it's for a total of 20 FTE. And then obviously we rely on a lot of seasonals to help us during the summer and winter months and things like that. So, we create spaces for our community. We provide events and programs. We manage and maintain our facilities, and we engage in partnerships to do a lot of the things we do. In fact, there's a thread that weaves from engagement and partnerships throughout a lot of the things that we do in our department. And that just didn't start recently with the talk of engagement and whatnot, but we've been doing it for many, many years. And we'll have slides on all of these later, so I'm not gonna spend a lot of time. But basically, we do all this to make people's lives better at the end of the day. And so, here for it. Inclusive and welcoming. We're constantly designing and redesigning our spaces to make you feel good when you come into those spaces, to make sure that they're welcoming regardless of age, gender, cultural background, to make sure that you're able to relax or exercise or play or meet or whatever it is that you want to do in those spaces. Our parks promote health and wellness. They help people reduce stress. They assist with mental health. They provide opportunities for exercise. And perhaps one of the biggest things is these spaces create opportunities for social gatherings. It gives the community a chance to connect and engage when they attend. So, sustainable and resilient. When we are looking at making changes out in the system and or designing new spaces, we're constantly looking at the materials that we're using, looking at the design of it, whether it's working with Ryan on a parking lot and things like that, or whether it's trying to make sure that our one of our garage structures can take on solar panels in the future if we decide to go that way. So, or it could be as simple as the cleaning materials that we use. And maintainable. As our needs continue to grow and our staff remains the same, the more we can design in a way that it reduces the need for maintenance. That is such a big thing. And so we do that collaboratively. We involve groups from across departments to discuss those types of things to try to make sure at the end of the day we end up with a quality product. Parks, trails, redevelopment, those are the things that we're involved in on a daily basis. It could be something as, I'm not gonna say as simple as the Greenway, the Lake Marion Greenway, because there were a lot of things that went into that, and it took a lot of time to create that successful project. The inclusive playground, another example that you see in the picture there. We're currently working on looking at the opportunity of providing a cricket field at one of our parks. Obviously pickleball courts, we talk about them a lot, you guys hear about them a lot. Our Park and Rec System Master Plan, it's hard to believe we updated that in 2017, it's already 5 years old. But we really use that as an opportunity. We actively engage our community in that process. They share what their thoughts and their needs are, and then we use that as a guide to help us make our decisions as we continue to make changes to our park system. I list the basics up here. Nobody really thinks about the basics unless the basics haven't been accomplished when you show up, right? Whether it's a meeting room has not been set up, or whether there's not a portable toilet in the park when you're expecting it to be there, or whether there was not good notification that the dog park has to be shut down for some maintenance. Those are important things that take time, and yet they can have a huge impact on someone's experience if it's not done. And we just accept and take for granted that it's going to be done on a regular basis. Connecting the community to amenities and events. We have fields, courts, rinks out in our park system, and obviously we have individuals who may just want to do something as simple as having a birthday party at a park setting. We work with organizations all the time to put thousands of recreational experiences out onto our fields each year. And then obviously there's special events, whether it's running races or groups coming in to host some type of event at Nicollet Commons Park. It could be a tournament out at a complex. We're actively involved in helping them get set up, make sure that our staff who are going to be preparing those areas know what they need and that it's ready for them when they arrive. We have park shelters and buildings. You'll drive by our parks on any given weekend and see lots of people out either having a party, a family gathering, you name it, they're taking place in the shelters and the parks on a every weekend pretty much throughout the summer and often throughout the week because the weekends are full, or that date just works better for those folks. Our garden plots and market gardens are another thing that we've added recently that we help the community get involved in and provide those spaces. I talked about special events, and so there's just all those things that are scheduled types of activities out in our parks involves our staff. We enhance our community through our programs. There's a picture of our Rec Times up there that lists all of our programs. We put that out. And this one in particular is our summer one. But we have individual activity or individual impacts on people when they participate. And that has to do with helping expose them to lifelong habits. There are participation-wise, you have stress reduction, a decrease in, or an increase in self-esteem. There's all kinds of things that are documented on people participating in recreation programs. The community benefits, we help to build stronger communities through the things that we put on out in our park system. And that's basically, we see that when we have, Party on the Plaza and the community comes out and we're connecting people and giving them an opportunity to gather regardless of what your background is, your age, whatever. It's a place where people can connect in our community. The economic benefits, if you've had children and you've participated in some type of recreation event, you can probably relate to the idea that if it's an hour-long program, you're probably going to drop them off and go run an errand. If it's 2 or 3 hours long, you may do more errand running or think about grabbing dinner afterwards and things like that. So people are traveling to our community for some of the events and programs, or they're already in our community, and now that they're out and about, they're visiting our stores, our restaurants, our gas stations, and they're taking care of business. The environmental benefit, more than ever, we're trying to look at exposing our young people to nature. It's becoming a less and less popular experience for people in younger ages to be connected to nature. And at the end of the day, we need our younger generations to be exposed to nature because they're the ones that are going to be caring about the environment in the future. So the more that we can create programs and opportunities where they can learn and explore and be engaged, and then when they get to that age of accountability and they can be involved, they can say, oh yeah, I remember when I was younger, I did that, right? Program variety, as I mentioned, the Rec Times, if you just look through it, we've got special events, music and arts activities, youth and family programs, adult sports programs, fitness programs, nature programs, facility-specific programs like our golf course, ice center. And we often we talked about it a little earlier downstairs about contracted services being a big thing about what we do and try to help us meet all the different needs and interests in our community to try to serve them well. Enhancing our community through facilities. I like to think of this as the team behind the scenes when it comes to asset management. Before I get into that, so this particular thing in a previous presentation, there was a question about a picture, and so that came up. I tried to dig into it. I don't know if this was an event going on or this was the result of some shortage in parking, but I'll have to get back to you. Facilities team.
It's a good
so,
one, Garrett. I'll beat you.
Our group takes care of 10 different facilities directly, city-owned buildings. City Hall, police, our own maintenance facility, Heart of City ramp, the deck. We have some radio buildings. And then of course our staff supports all the other buildings as well. So we help out at the maintenance center, the ice center, the water treatment plant, the Ames Center, our well houses. It's really a team effort to try to make sure our facilities are well maintained and cared for. Our building management, this is really about our health and wellness. We started a program, it's our Be Well Healthy Buildings. There's information online for that if you visit our website, but it kind of lays out all the different things that our staff does to make sure that if you visit one of our buildings, you know that we're taking efforts to make sure that it's a healthy location, and it's well cared for when you arrive. We don't even think about, middle of winter, we live in Minnesota, we're involved in snow removal out in the facilities to make sure you can get to and from our buildings safely. And then the meeting setups and things like that, that take place on a daily basis. And talk about, earlier today, there was probably a group in here of staff, if not in this room, in other rooms, and then our team is constantly flipping over rooms and getting them set up for the group that's coming in, and then when that's done, they're tearing it down and getting it ready for city staff the next day. So it's just a nonstop process, and again, they do a great job, and if they didn't, we would have a negative experience as a result. Improve culture, when I think about that, we design and provide spaces that align with our organizational values. But the fire station one really comes to mind on a situation where we were really intentional about not just looking at a building as brick and mortar, but we were looking at it as how it impacts people on a daily basis that are part of that building and or visit that building. And so, that's an exciting part that maybe hasn't been done as much in the past that I'm looking forward to continuing to do into the future. Obviously, safety and security, whether it's just lighting in the parking lot, making sure that access to the buildings are, when it's open to the public or staff, when you run your key card or pull the door, it opens when it's supposed to, and when you're not supposed to be able to do that, those things are not happening. Cleaning materials, I talked about it. Obviously COVID had a huge impact on our team and all the great work that they did during that time to make sure that these spaces remain safe and clean. But that continues whether COVID is at its peak or if it's where it is now or the next thing that comes along. So we're constantly involved in that process. And then the community, I talked a little bit about already about how, after 4:30, there's often groups that come into this building or some of our other buildings on a regular basis. We're here to greet them, here to make sure their needs are being met. If they need us while their meeting is taking place or their event's taking place, we're there to help them. And at the end, we're here to make sure that everything's been cleaned up and it's ready to go for the day tomorrow. Engaging our community for over 30 years. I talked a little bit, earlier about we live and breathe community engagement, and I'll list off just a small number of the groups, but in a little bit. But park and facility improvements. We generally don't just go out. Sometimes if it's a more simple project, we will just replace something. But if it's new and has an opportunity to involve the community, we're trying to do that. And you think of Red Oak Inclusive Playground, we involved the school district, we involved the community, we had online options, we had open house situations, we changed, at the end of the day, we changed what the design ultimately looked like. So it's not just, to us, it's not just going through an exercise. It's important to us. We make significant changes. We make small changes. It all depends on the situation, but it's something that we truly believe in and buy into on a regular basis. I think of something like the dog park that started back in 2002 with a group of 8 people from the community that helped me put up a $2,000 fence. And we still have a group of people that help us on a monthly basis to maintain that facility and to make improvements and do things. And it's just, again, it's part of the fabric of how we try to do business on things. BA 191 was another thing that I think of. They've had opportunities to raise funds, and we've made improvements out at that complex, largely in part because they're a regular user of it, and there are certain things that they wanted to see, and they were able to help fund it and things like that. So the complexity and the level of engagement will vary depending on who the group is, what their financial situation looks like, what they're asking for, and we're open to all of them across the spectrum.
So, Garrett, with
Yes.
a question on all of the partner groups that we have, because doesn't the BAC also help with programming and
Yes, they do.
the volunteers that come in and help?
Yes.
It's that kind of partnership.
we do meet, you know, the BAC is one of the groups that we have a liaison to, because they are the largest group serving the youth here in Burnsville, and so we attend their monthly meetings, try to adjust and manage the things that they need, and then they also contribute financially to make improvements. Sue Fisher Fields on Highway 13 is a good example, where we were able to partner with them to help build the concession and restroom building that's out there and things like that. So there's examples of that on an ongoing basis with our different groups. The facility management, I'll just reference something like the Police City Hall project. We had an open house, and I've probably shared this story too much, but it's one that it was just an awesome situation of, there was a person who came in and said, you know, my child has this particular situation, and I see that I wanna know, are your flush toilets and your faucets automatic or are they manual? And at the time, they had been set up for being automatic, and the request was, can you please make sure that there's one manual, because an automatic flush toilet or faucet has a really negative impact on my child. And we would have never thought of that at the time, without doing that engagement piece. And it is, you know, and I've talked to numerous people as I've told the story, and they're like, yes, and I agree with them, and I'm so glad you did that type of thing. So, you know, when we look at programs and events, we're doing surveys, after action reports, we do pop-up sessions out in the parks. You know, we work with our special event groups, and meet them out on the location. We try to find their needs and assist in planning and things like that. And then as I get to the community partners, you know, we have liaisons and partners with our youth athletic programs. I mentioned our dog park group is PAC. They meet monthly as well. ISD 191 we meet with. We have an adult softball group that we meet with. We had Youth for Tomorrow for a while that existed for many years. South of the River Recreators is our cities that are south here that we look and we partner with and try to offer collaborative programming that couldn't be done just in our community. The Burnsville Community Foundation, we have our legacy and community event groups, the Lions Club, the JCs, the Rotary. It's just a small group of the people that our staff are regularly involved in. Sometimes it's just meeting and planning things. Sometimes we're receiving funds and are able to do things out in the community that we wouldn't be able to do on our own, and it really makes a difference at the end of the day. Other things that we do worth noting, inclusion and belonging. Again, this has become, we've become more intentional on this, and I couldn't be happier to be talking about it, but we continue to work towards breaking down those systematic barriers, and we do that through a regular program and policy review. Our staff sits down at least twice a year, and we talk about things that we could be doing differently, possibly to make accessibility better or easier for someone for whatever reason. We have our own department equity and inclusion policy that everyone is aware of, that challenges them to continue to have staff education and training. You know, we intentionally with facility design talked about, you know, we're making sure that not only are we following the ADA requirements, but if we're aware of situations that we can make someone's experience better, we want to at least talk about it, consider it, figure out if it's the right thing to do for us. Facility design, I mentioned, you know, we've started working with a cricket group the last 2 years. We've been putting on actual clinics and helping them find places to play in our park system, which our park system just didn't have, right? And now we're actually looking at how do we have a more designated space that, you know, they've made do and have been happy that we've been willing to accommodate them, but at the same time, it's a popular thing with the group of people that we're working with, and we want to try to make that as good of an experience as we can. So, and then obviously our staff training. We're regularly trying to participate in our state organizational activities or other things that come through our email that give us a chance to continue to learn and grow and improve in these areas. Trends, I've been saying it for years, we don't just do the same thing every year. Greg talks about us being a strengths-based organization, and one of my strengths is, was at one point a maximizer, and it's how do we look at getting better, right? And doing things differently is one of those ways. And at the same time, I wanna point out the word on the screen is trends, it's not trendy. I wanna make sure that as we're looking at things that are, that can be timeless at the end of the day, right? And that we're not investing in jumping into something that 5 years from now may not be a good fit for Burnsville for some reason. So things that we've done include the dog park, splash pads, pickleball, nature play. We switched up some of our playground programming that used to be just for a couple hours, and based on feedback, we now have all-day playground programming. It seems like a simple thing, but I'll talk a little bit more about why it's not just a simple thing. Pop-up parks, where we take our park stuff out into places where maybe accessibility is a challenge, and provide those opportunities. Community gardens, and another thing that I'm just really proud of our team about, and because it's involved multiple departments, is, you know, we're not just looking to replace a volleyball court that's out in a random spot and not being used on a regular basis, because that's what we did 25 years ago, and it was the right thing to do. So not only are we not just replacing it, but we're looking at removing it and reducing our maintenance needs, and helping to deal with some of the challenges that we have in maintaining our park system. Sometimes we may choose to relocate it from an ADA accessibility standpoint, but sometimes we're not putting back these amenities because we would rather be investing in what the needs are of Burnsville in 2020, not just relying on what it was back in 1980 and 1990. So what has changed?
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
Gary, could I
Yeah.
ask a question?
Yeah.
What amenities in the last few years have been removed, and do you have any that you can share that are anticipated to be removed? I'm starting to hear a little bit of community frustration with losing, you know, having amenities removed, and I wanna be better informed and involved in what's being done and why, and so we can feel I can feel that question a little bit better than I am now, cause I'm not fielding it super well, cause it's catching me off guard a little bit.
Sure,
Yeah.
Absolutely, Councilmember Keeley. When it comes to the frameworks plan, we have a website page for the frameworks projects. It lists every park that is targeted for, it could be something as simple as reduction in mowing. It could be it could be the actual removal of an amenity. Whatever it is, if there's something scheduled, the park is listed, and there's an estimated timeline. We've struggled to meet that timeline for a variety of reasons, whether it was COVID or whether it was a lack of staff to be able to carry out the projects. But nonetheless, we're trying to anticipate what that is. What I have determined is the appropriate way to deal with these things is, if someone is going to show up at a park and it's gonna provide them with a different experience than what they had when they were there before the project happened, we will notify the park, and that within the certain distance and whatnot of the park, and let them know that there is a plan for it. And then we did do that at all the parks that we are aware of a couple years ago when we introduced the frameworks program, gave people an opportunity to provide feedback. We actually did do some reduced mowing in the Terrace Oaks East neighborhood, and it was not well received, and so we adjusted that, right? And so we're trying things. We know that anytime you make a change, somebody's probably going to have an opinion about whether that was a good idea or not. But we're definitely being strategic about it. We're definitely communicating it. And at the end of the day, like I said, if we remove a volleyball court, that, for example, it probably just happened, if I remember correctly, North River Hills has a volleyball court in the north. It had a volleyball court in the northwest corner. that probably most people who have gone into North River Hills had no idea it was there unless your house was right in that back corner, right? It was not in good shape. It was not used by the general users of the park. And so we did notify the neighborhoods or the people that lived in the neighborhood, and it has been removed. If for some reason we had major pushback and all kinds of people want a volleyball court, that's still not the place where I'm putting it back in. You know, we didn't take a perfectly good volleyball court and say, hey, we're just removing it, right? It was at end of life, and you'll see on the chart when if you look at the website page, it'll say basketball court at this location has no accessibility, it's under power lines, and it's poorly used, we're going to remove it at end of life, right? If 3 kids are going out there every so often and using it, yes, keep doing it, it's no maintenance to us, that's a great thing. It's probably not worth the $50,000 to put it back in when it's time to put it back in.
Right.
So that's kind of the concept behind the framework.
Well, the other one that, I don't know if this is one that you got an email from, because I remember when we did Woke, but before Woke was fixed, we went on, I think it was just you and I, Dan, that went on the tour. And Woke was one of the parks that we're gonna have to replace. And people were thinking that we took a really good park, and they didn't know what we were doing with it, and I was able to answer that because we went out on that tour. And the thing is, what they didn't know is that Woke was an old park. They didn't look at it closely like we did, and it was really in bad repair, and it needed to be. I did loop back with the family after Woke was done, and I asked them what they thought of Woke, and they says, oh my God, my kids love it. Well,
Got a lot of good stuff.
yeah, because I've been back to Woke, not just once but twice, but how you laid it out was a lot better than what it was laid out before.
Thank you, we've had this discussion on and off over the last 16 years about what parks are being used, what amenities are being used, and what do we do, and, you know, if there was a huge demand, we would maintain it, but when it's sitting there for 10 years with almost no use, I would agree, that's a poor use of resources to maintain something that's not being used. And so, now that I know it's on our website, I can go refer folks there. And that's possibly where they're learning about it, and I didn't, I probably missed some in a previous meeting where it was there, it's just not on my radar on a daily basis, but the volleyball in North River Hills was one of them. But
Was that the one out at Crystal Lake?
no, I thought it was at North River Hills that was being.
Oh,
'Cause it just
North
happened.
River
Yeah, it
Hills,
just
yeah,
happened. Yeah,
we
that
saw
was the
that
last
email, but,
I thought I heard a while back about a ball field being taken out, but I can't remember what
That
part
might
of
have been
was
Woke,
even
but it was put back.
Yeah, so I know Interlochen so one of the things that we just did at Interlochen Park, that's behind Byerly's in Burnsville.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a parking lot off of, is that Portland, I
Yeah.
wanna say?
Yeah.
To get to the ball field, and unfortunately for a lot of our
Yeah.
parks, when they were laid out in the 80s and 90s, to get to the ball fields, you have to trek all the way across the
Yeah.
parking lot, right? And so the athletic associations don't find those to be favorable to use, they're not accessible, so the grandparents or anyone who has
That's like Black Dog,
yes,
Mobility
a
challenges,
mobility
right?
challenge
yeah.
is it's just not a preferable place, right? So in that particular one, the fence there was still in pretty good shape. So we removed the red rock. If you don't drag red rock on a regular basis, it starts to grow weeds in it and it just
Yeah.
becomes undesirable, right? So we removed the red rock and we left the fence in place because it's still in good shape. And so if I wanted to go out there with my son or daughter and throw practice to them, I could still do that because the fence is there and it'll stop the ball. It's not gonna provide the same fielding opportunity, but we do have other fields near, that is the nice thing about our park system, is that most people have multiple
options.
parks within so many minutes to get to, right? So depending on what it is that you're seeking, you should be able to find a park nearby.
Mhm.
I can't guarantee that every park is gonna provide every opportunity for everyone, right? So, and so those are the things that strategically we're trying to do. We now don't have to take a tractor to Interlochen and drag it. And it's no longer an eyesore if we don't get there because the weeds are growing through.
Mhm.
And yet I don't wanna diminish the fact that the person who lived by the volleyball court or who lived by the ball field no longer can just walk out their back door and have that amenity, right? And that's a meaningful experience that I don't wanna dismiss that's happened, and I can empathize with the fact that that exists. And at the end of the day, we're trying to make good decisions for our park system, and not everyone's going to agree with them.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Okay. Nicely done.
Park system needs, so that was just one of the things, you know, our park system is 30+ years old, and the needs in our community are changing. And so, not only are those needs changing, but to try to meet the new things, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but it's really easy just to repeat what you did the year before, because you have a system in place, and then it just, okay, everyone just go do it. The hard thing to do is to come up with new ideas and to plan for them and then to implement them. That takes a lot more time, right? And so as we're working with groups and trying to implement new things, it takes more time to do it. The amount of community engagement, I shared that we've been doing it for 30 years, and yet we're doing it more now than we ever have before. And it's not even close. And it's extremely valuable, and I wouldn't change it for the world, but it also takes a lot of time to do it. Reduction in staff. We used to have a parks director, we used to have a recreation director, we used to have a natural resources director. And we now have Ryan and I, and we're kind of sharing some of those different duties that took place with those 3 individuals. And then our other staff are absorbing some of those things as well. We used to have 2 other recreation positions that got absorbed into the community engagement staff. And they did take some of their things with them to community engagement that they were doing because we were a department that did community engagement, like the volunteer network and things like that. But there were also some things left behind. So our staff are fewer and doing more things that are more time consuming than we've ever done before. You may ask the question, how are we doing this? And to me, there's 2 big ways. Our staff are working later hours, they're working weekends, they're doing more things, working more hours, and probably more importantly, it's the technology and the multitasking that we do. I'll mention my wife for the first time ever in a meeting. My wife cannot stand when our family's together and we have screen time going on when we're in a group setting. In most of our meetings, it's very normal for people to be working on multiple things at a time, right? They're trying to figure out, how do I listen to this meeting and how do I get the next thing done that I need to do? I'll share a personal experience. I was standing out at Old Fire Station 1 property talking about tearing it down with people live on site and participating in a Teams meeting that I just couldn't miss, right? Driving in the car, taking a meeting, getting from one place to another that we have to go to, right? So there are just more things happening and people are juggling more balls than we ever have before, and that's how we're accomplishing these things. I would say we're managing it. I do have a concern about burnout. I do have a concern about us making mistakes. I do have a concern about the quality of our work going down as a result of the fact that, you know, you can do one thing a lot better than you can do 3 things. Doesn't mean you can't do the 3 things, but there's chances of error and mistakes at that point. So,
Danji?
You talk about how you get it done. That's a lot of overtime. I don't know if you
No.
have overtime in it, but a lot of long hours, a lot of weekends. Is that sustainable?
It was in my closing slide.
I jumped ahead.
But I'll answer it now, so, because you asked the question, and thank you, Councilmember Gustafson. I think our current situation, and there's some buildup to my statement on why I'm saying what I'm saying. I think we can manage our group of 20 as a team doing what we're doing, as long as our level of work expectation remains in the neighborhood that it's at. Where I start to get concerned is when the level of expectation continues to rise and rise and rise, okay? And I've been here for 25 years, and that expectation, just like every other department, the demands and needs of the community are growing, and how we're expected to respond and take care of those needs are growing. And we all have a real passion to do it well. Dan's story matches my story, matches Tanya's story, matches Ryan and Tom's story, right? Our staff are dedicated and committed to doing what they're doing, and so they're gonna keep going at it until they burn out or make a mistake or something happens, right? So, can we do what we're doing right now? Yes. I mean, we make the most of it, and I think people enjoy working here and they like doing what they're doing. But there is going to be a threshold where the demands are going to be more than what I'm going to feel good managing.
Yeah, and I have seen the increase in activities and engagements in things like Party in the Plaza. That takes a lot of resources. And they're very successful. And each time you do it well, the expectation from the community rises.
And for me too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, because I see that and I hear it. And so all of the pop-up events, people like that. But again, those are all new activities that you brought online. They like it, now they're going to expect more. And what I'm seeing is that you talk about staffing. So I was waiting to make my comments at the end too, but since we're looking at.
Well, when he said what it takes, I thought you need to
Yeah.
clarify this a
So,
bit more for us.
Go ahead, yeah.
Strategic priorities, our team works collaboratively with our stakeholders to provide safe, sustainable parks, programs, and facilities that enhance our community vibrancy and organizational culture. So I'm gonna be able, I know I've spoken a lot, I should be able to breeze through a lot of these because a lot of things that our strategic priorities were really a part of what we do. I meet with our team on a regular basis. Our vision plan basically says if there's anything that you see that doesn't fit into a strategic priority, we shouldn't be doing it, right? So when I tell our story, it's matching our strategic priorities. Park and facility design, the safety component, I think about working with Tom and his team about, how do we incorporate infrastructure from an IT perspective that can assist with security and in the planning of our park buildings and having Wi-Fi in the systems and things like that that can assist those types of things. Facility management, they're safe and healthy from the time you come into the building to the time you leave, and we take pride in that process. Program events, planning, delivery. Again, our staff are involved in trainings on a regular basis. We're conscious of our ratios when we're having park programs going on. Unfortunately, many of you, well, I think you all know, I mean, we're dealing with things like needing to put barriers in places in our parks to deal with certain things going on out in the world these days. So it's like there's always something. It's front and center on what we do, just like pretty much every other department that shares that. Engagement, I talked about how we're regularly involved in that, and how we're actively seeking feedback from our community to help us do the best we can to provide the services and the types of experiences they want to have. Organizational culture, again, designing and maintaining great workspaces. Our team, if an office or a cube or whatever needs to be changed, that's our team that's involved in doing that. And we constantly figuring out how do we put all the people into the limited spaces that we have and make the best of it. And thank you to the department directors and the staff for giving us grace at times to try to do the best we can with what we have to work with. Support and encourage professional development. It's not only our staff participating in it, but again, our staff are setting up all the different meetings throughout the day so that those types of things in our when our staff walk in, they get a great experience in the space. Community vibrancy, people really do appreciate beautiful parks and buildings and things
And
that are involved
landscaping.
in those spaces, right? And we just started doing some of the placemaking and things like that, but whether it's going down to Nicollet Commons or visiting Fire Station 1 or whatever it is, those quality, beautiful experiences have an impact on people at the end of the day.
Burnham Wood is one of the most beautiful assets that we have, outdoor space assets.
Dan and the Dan before, current Dan, have just done a great job of using Autobahn and the other concepts to make that not only a golf experience, but just a beautiful place to walk around and look at what's
Not
going
all
on.
the flowers.
Strategic priorities, again, I'll just jump to the bottom one. When I think of maintaining the facilities, so we have a picture of the Ice Center here. It celebrated its 50th anniversary last year.
Yeah.
You'd be hard pressed to walk into an ice center that's 15 to 20 years old, let alone 50 years old, that looks as clean and as nice on the inside, and even on the exterior as what that building does. Our team just does a phenomenal job creating great experiences for people who are participating in those types of programs. Sustainability, years ago we brought to council, something like getting involved in community gardens and whatnot, right? And there was a lot of uncertainties about that, and it was denied for a couple years and then revisited, and now we're pretty much all in on that with what we can be. And
Well,
it's
remember when we
producing-
first did it out in Neal Park?
I'm sorry, I said community gardens and I
Yeah.
meant solar gardens. Our solar gardens are something from a sustainability standpoint that's paying dividends for us, and as energy prices increase, it's only going to continue to grow. So, helping with the accounts and setting up those types of things makes things like that possible. Our aspirations, again, nothing should be surprising here. We want to provide high quality facilities. We want to provide high quality trails, and we want to provide great programs and opportunities for the community to engage with each other and to engage with our staff. In closing, so this was the last slide there. I shared my concern about the burnout. It does say we have 20 and we're sticking with 20. I will tell you, and Ryan and I work a lot together. He's a great teammate to work with. They're actually, from my perspective, I would say it's a 20 and a half, because we know that achieving projects in our organization is really challenging right now, and we're falling behind every day. And so we did have a request for one project management person, and that ended up being slotted into his. But I would have, and our, right now JJ and Scott and myself all do projects, because we just can't get them all done, and we're not getting them all done. So having more access to staff like Corey and whatnot would help us to continue to deliver those some more. So why? Again, I'm looking at this, when we went through the study, I looked at this from an organizational lens. Someone on the leadership team, I know that we have staffing needs across the organization. I know that we have facility needs. I know that we have park needs, and I'll be back before you to share the results of that park study. I know we have IT needs. We have needs everywhere, and it felt like the right thing to do right now to recognize that we have a lot of needs, and to put some of the needs that might be a little higher priority, and I know my staff, if they're watching, may cringe for me saying that, but the reality is we can't do all of this at one time. And so I hope someday, if the opportunity is right and the needs remain, that number may change. But for the time being, I'm comfortable with what's there.
Well, let me ask you this, because we talk about aspiration. And I know that this year, you also offered lessons for beginners for pickleball and tennis. So you're adding more. And you're saying you can't do it all. But you're trying to do it. And also to maintain the spaces. The other is that you're providing a lot of engagements in helping our community to be healthy. And that the amenities help our community as well to enjoy not only the activities that we provide, but with each item that you add, and you say your team is burned out and you don't need any more. How many, my question is, how many seasonals do you have to provide some of the work that we need to get done during this?
So Madam Mayor, I mean, to answer that question, I believe it's in that depending on the season, it can be anywhere from 20 to 40. And
So
that's
in the
been a challenge
wintertime,
just-
you would say 20. In
Yeah.
the summertime, how many do you need?
It's in that, well, our need is in that 30+ range, right?
Of seasonals.
We have not been able to hire the seasonals that we need, and so our service has changed as a result. And I think for Parks, Rec, and Facilities, to me, that's the story, is that, you know, we put out something like the Rec Times every year, which has a lot of things in it, and we try to offer a wide variety of opportunities for people. And as long as the organization and the community are comfortable with the types of things that we're providing with the people that we have, I believe this is something that we can continue to manage to do. It's just my concern, and the fears that I mentioned earlier would start to come into play as
Yeah.
those expectations
Yeah.
and needs
Yeah.
continue to rise, right? And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
and like I said, for the next few years, if expectations remain the same, I am comfortable with where we're at. It's,
Yeah.
if
So-
expectations change or when we get to a new place, what does that look like?
Yeah, see, for me, the more we offer enriching experiences, the more the expectation.
Mhm.
I can tell you, even this summer with all of the parties on the plaza, and I don't know if you know, how often you're on Facebook, the Flicks and the Bricks, you know, you have a parent talking about having a date night with her son, and then you see all of these pictures. What an experience. So they're going. So for me, you know, when I hear you say, you know, and then I read Greg's weeklies, and we're going into faux hanging baskets.
What?
That's another discussion.
Faux hanging baskets.
FAUX?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And I just came back from a trip, and I see them in small towns, and they've got beautiful baskets. So I've been taking pictures and sending it to Greg. If they
Are they
can do it,
faux
why
flowers?
can't we?
How do you know those aren't faux flowers?
Because I went up and touched them,
And they were real flowers.
and they are real flowers. Yeah, go ahead.
So I understand what you're saying. Our staff is stretched in your department as far as the hours they work, the weekends and all that, because of all the activities we do. And if we wanna take on something else, let's say an Oktoberfest should happen, or a Winterfest, or anything like that would happen in the city, you would be very hard pressed to be able to work on those things unless we got rid of some other things. And again, I wanna go back to my original question, how sustainable is that? It concerns me when because I know our whole city's understaffed right now, and our whole city's doing lots of man hours to make things happen, and I think it's great, everybody wants to be here and they wanna make it happen, but how long can you keep making that happen without getting that relief in there? Cause as a city, we're gonna grow, and I think the things we do in our parks and everything else are gonna just do nothing but grow as well over time. And with all the building that's going on, we're bringing more people in the city every day, and I want you to be able to keep up, and I don't want you to come back next year or the year after and say, oh my God, we're in deep, we need 5 people, and I'm sorry, we should have done that. I appreciate you're looking out, you're a team player, and I get that, and I know you're looking out for all the staff needs out there, and you're figuring recreation and all that can maybe settle in for a while, but I'm not getting the sense you feel that's a long-term solution, not to have people.
Councilmember Gustafson, thanks for the comments. I mentioned earlier, when we're repeating programs and things like that, that becomes a lot easier, right? So it's when the new things come in, it's when asks for deep dives or whatever, where it's time consuming and it's information collecting during busy times of the, obviously Parks and Rec is a seasonal type of thing, right? So that's where the stress starts to come in on the staff, or if it's a brand new, huge type of thing that requires a lot of engagement, a lot of planning and whatnot, and often that requires a lot of different people, and those things all just become time consuming, right? So, some of my other coworkers here, we don't necessarily get to dictate how many calls they receive to go to something or whatever, and so I will continue to just say, as long as the expectations of the organization and the council remain in a similar location, we will figure out a way to manage it, and we will do it well. If those expectations start to change dramatically, my request at that point will change. I don't know
Well,
if that.
But you hear what I'm saying?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, and that's what my concern is this, we continue to enrich people's lives, and they're our bosses, okay? When their expectations elevate, then we're gonna have to meet them in some way. And I know that a lot of children's programs have been cut. We used to partner with the Rotary on some of those, and I don't think we do them anymore. Or do we still have, we have Kids of Summer
And it's
in a different way?
Yes, and we do have some of it, but we have changed some of it, Madam
Yeah.
Mayor.
Yeah.
And some of
And-
that has been from a more of a demand situation, some of it is, that has been the conversation, is we have our resources and we can't keep doing everything, nor do we necessarily want to. It's hard for staff to give up on or to cut things, right? And that's my job, to help them manage that process. But to a volleyball court getting, removed, it's going to impact people. When we stop doing a program, it's going to impact people.
Kids of Summer has impacted some people.
Mhm.
So,
So, I think, and then some of the things, did you get an email from Ed Del Moro on the faux baskets?
We all did.
I believe that there was communication with the council, Mayor.
Don't blame Garrett for that.
That'd be Ryan, if we wanna focus in the right area.
Yeah.
Stand up and take it, Ryan.
COVID, so.
I had several
Blame Garrett for
different, different kinds of amenities, so instead of, because when was it COVID? Was it
Yes.
COVID or something else that, because we didn't have
It was a staffing issue.
it was a staffing issue, seasonal staffing, so I watched some of those people do their work, and gets done, but it's staffing.
Mayor Council, I think it's in this presentation is an important kind of reminder of what we did through the organizational analysis and now both the service inventory and these conversations, which is, to the best of our ability, bring the right people in and circle the leadership team around identifying what are our current and projected 5-year staffing needs, assuming that these service conversations in today's level of service would stay relatively the same, right? Which is a difficult exercise to go to our Parks, Recreation, and Facilities Director and say, do that and think about, and also consider all of the possibilities, right? It just doesn't work that way. And I do think Garrett and his team, along with CLA, our OD folks, our HR staff, have come to the right place with this recommendation with the information that we have now. I'll also put a caveat on that Garrett hasn't. It's addressed in the last observation on this slide. We're anticipating both efficiencies and potential strain on our staffing resources when we look at new facilities as opposed to existing facilities. We've done our best to make reasonable assumptions based on the policy decisions that you all made to this point in time, and those things will change and evolve even over the planning time, right? Leadership team knows that one of my favorite sayings among many is, the one thing a plan is good for is you should plan to change it. That's part of the dynamic here. But doing our best with where we're currently at, we think this reflects both the current service level and our needs into the planning window. Certainly your policy direction, community demand, our level of engagement. There were some really good questions tonight about how we're communicating and convening with the community around parks improvement projects, around framework delivery. Frankly, if your expectations around that change, that changes this recommendation in my mind. It just does. I can't offer other efficiencies to do that work differently than we are now. And I will also say, I spent 15 years in a Parks and Rec agency. One of the other observations I made coming into this organization is from a rec programming, from a pure Parks and Rec perspective, we do a lot with very little staff resource. And we get creative, and we have some really good, really talented folks that work particularly in rec programming among Garrett's staff that are doing quite a bit, comparatively speaking, to other agencies who do this work. And I think we should be proud of that.
No,
But I also think that we should recognize that balance
Yeah.
to the conversation.
I admire and are proud of the work that our staff do each and every day and what you deliver. And even the innovation and the things that you have done that enriches lives. Let me tell you, the next party on the plaza is going to be just as successful as the last two. If you've gone to any of the events in the heart of the city, it's packed. On days like today where it's nice or days that are hot, that park is packed.
Elizabeth?
Yeah.
Just one more thing I want to add. I know we're talking a lot about next year's budget, but we're actually talking about the next 5 years. That's how we plan
Yeah.
things. And if there's needs out there, it's good to know there's going to be the needs year 2, 3, 4, 5, as opposed to suddenly it comes upon us and we're looking at a whole different number than we were anticipating. And so it gives us a better chance to make some good decisions on a forward. I mean, you may not need someone for 2 years, but fine. If that's what it is, then in 2 years you need 2 people. But it's good to know now than it is in 2 years when all of a sudden it just shows up at a meeting like this. And
It's
Well,
a way, it's
that's what
a
I'm-
way
that's
for
what I'm trying
us
to get
it's a way for us to also plan on staffing and budgeting.
Well, Dan reminds us all too often that the budget is a Rubik's Cube that fights back. It's going to be a similar, our org analysis is going to be a similar complicated reality. Our service levels are going to be a similar complicated reality as we make sure that you have the information you need to make good policy decisions. And I would say that the organizational analysis, from my perspective, much like our compensation plan, much like our budget, is an iterative process. This is not a one and done activity. Our service inventory work is an iterative process. It will not be a one and done activity. We're going to have to revisit these conversations on a fairly regular, annual, if not a little bit longer basis to make sure that not only how we're serving the community from an operations perspective is reflective of where you are at the highest level of your policy making, but also that it accurately reflects what we believe that we need from an appropriate staffing complement, and what does that mean from a budget perspective. So
Yeah.
for as much as I would love to say this is going to be, pop the corks and celebrate that we're done with this work, it's going to be
No,
much like our other
absolutely.
strategic planning
Yeah,
efforts that is
it's-
going to happen every year.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Well, what I wanna say is thank you. And to Dan T, thank you. I mean, and Greg, for service, reports on how we deliver service to our community. This is enlightening in many ways. So thank you for enlightening us, because it helps us when we talk to our constituents. It helps us when we look at the budget, and then we can talk to the people about why the budget is what it is, and what it is. It's driven by their expectations as well. They hear about what the needs are in public safety. They hear the needs that you all have, and what IT's needs are. And also the communication that we have going out is more than we've ever done. And let me tell you, that expectation has also risen. Yeah,
I will,
are you
I will, I
smiling
will,
because you
I will
know that
I will take the blame, because I know that if I don't, Garrett will remind me later that I have incredibly high expectations around staff communication internally with our community,
and,
among our community, and for our community.
yeah,
And I also recognize that
Yeah.
that is labor intensive.
it is.
Um,
And responding
a
to all
reality.
of that. And Hugo, thank you for the quick response. I mean, came in this morning, I sent it to Greg, or I asked her to contact Greg. And you took it on, and there it was, and she's a happy camper.
Thank you.
Yeah.
As we wrap up this evening's conversation, I think I would be remiss not to remind the council and the community as we continue this work. In September, we'll have a final report to the council that provides not only a very visual kind of representation of our service to the community, but also includes an exhaustive, comprehensive service inventory that our leadership team has completed work group by work group, department by department, that really is reflective of actually what is it that we do to best meet the needs of the community, and frankly what the investment of your budget and the community's budget provides for the resources that are committed to our operations.
You know, what I also like is that there is a YouTube on each of these meetings.
There are.
That I can direct people to. But do we have a portal where?
Yeah, so
this-
if council, you can access and the community can access all of this information, both the video recordings of these conversations, along with PDF versions of each of the slide decks that you've seen, and access to the formal minutes and agendas at burnsvillemn.gov/budget.
Every one of these is under
all there.
budget?
burnsvillemn.gov/budget.
Budget, all
Yep.
of these, is it, is
Yep.
in that?
So Madam Mayor, if you pull up that
Yeah.
portal, it'll
You
be
see-
a comprehensive kind of table that lists out all of our budget and service conversations,
Yeah.
with access to each of these documents and the videos and stuff.
Okay,
Madam Mayor, I have a question for
Yeah.
Garrett before he
Dan K.
leaves for the evening. Is this the webpage that you were referring to earlier about parks, projects, and renovation? The interactive map, or is there another page?
That's what it
Councilmember
is.
Keeley,
The transparency
I hope
portal.
I'm sharing this correctly, but if you go to the city's search option on the webpage and type in frameworks plan, I would be hopeful that is the best way to get to that.
This particular interactive map, I touched on, I think, every park, and they all came up, no information available. And its title isn't interactive for projects and renovations, but there's nothing on it that I could find. But it kind of, you know, user would expect something to be there, right? Parks Framework Plan,
Yes.
there we go, that's the first one that came up.
Okay.
We still have a website that it's still sometimes hard to find stuff. You know it's there, but can't seem to get the search words right to get it to come up.
Councilmember Keeley, that is a perennial comment of any local government agency that I have ever worked for, so.
But here's what I wanted
And
to,
this is a big leap, this is a big improvement over our old site.
Yeah.
It was horrible.
Oh my
And
God.
This
I
is
don't mean
really
to be,
good,
I don't mean to
and
be
it's still
flippant in that
deficient.
response, but it is part of, we are undertaking a complete kind of analysis of an assessment of the city's organizational and operational brand. That is part of the phasing approach to the project that Carissa had mentioned to you during her service conversation.
Yeah.
So we're well aware of the challenges and opportunities that exist when it comes to best delivering information.
North River Hills also got a red rock removal and a ball diamond. And remove remote shelters, what does that mean? What's a remote shelter?
Councilmember Keeley, a number of our parks have shelters that are kind of out in nowhere, and the findings.
Like lightning shelters?
Very
people would
remote.
run under because of a storm or something? right?
No, at the time, the idea was, it was an opportunity just to go picnic and be in the woods, and
Oh,
our staff tend to find less than desirable activities that have taken place in those at times, and they're also a higher maintenance to get to them and to maintain them. So sometimes it's better to remove those, if you get where I'm.
so it's a shelter like, you have with tables underneath, like at Crosstown West, across the street from me, there's a shelter that's up there. It gets used a lot, there's a barbecue grill and, those types, but sort of when they're buried in the woods, away from everything else.
Yeah.
Keely, you probably
Yeah,
have not seen some
probably.
of these shelters I'm referring to before.
Yeah.
I just remember
Yeah.
one building that
I
really
won't
bad.
put her on the spot, but I will venture a guess that Tanya would share a similar opinion.
Yeah. There's
Okay, no,
service
Tanya's
calls to those areas that are not, okay, got it. There's plenty of those across.
People have to
Southwest.
earn a living. Just saying.
oh, God. Anyway. Thank you, Dan T. and Garrett, for tonight's service report. Really appreciate all the work. It's very insightful. Thank you. Any other questions?
Mayor and Council, we have one more of these evenings ahead
Yeah.
that will include last but not least, three of our directors with you, coming up here just in a couple of weeks.
And who was that?
Looking forward to it.
You just pop quiz me.
I
didn't
did,
you?
I pop quiz you.
It is HR clerk and
Yeah.
community development.
Yeah,
Perfect.
Community development.
yeah,
We like community development. And we like HR, we love our clerk.
yeah.
You know, I equally love all of our departments.
Yeah, there you
Member
go.
Gustafson.
You can't play favorite. They're all your children and you can't play favorite.
We're all one big family, man.
Yeah, 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 we can't play favorites. Okay, thank you, everybody, and great work, great work. So it's good to know that I can direct them to this too, but I also direct them to our YouTube channel, because then they can
Yep, absolutely.
look at all of this.
And back to burnsvillemn.gov/budget, there are direct links
Yeah.
to each of these conversations on YouTube, so
And it
just an
has a
easy way
video.
for people to land
Yeah,
and find the
yeah,
information.
and the video is right there that
Yep.
they can also hit it and then they get it.
And our YouTube channel goes back years.
It does,
I
as a
know.
matter
You
of
pull
fact.
all
It
kinds of
does,
meetings.
it does, it does, so.
I encountered the reality that there's a strong difference between standard
standard-
definition and
oh
high
my gosh.
definition today. even,
Oh, there
as a matter of
is.
fact.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's very
Yeah.
visible.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, is there anything else? So thank you, everyone. We stand adjourned by acclamation.